It seems to me that power laws, those distributions with very thick tails, where you have a small number of outliers that often dominate all other activity, are ubiquitous. And that, particularly with respect to talent, whether we like them or not, they seem to be present where a small number of people do a fantastic amount of all of the innovation. What do we do if power laws are common to make people more comfortable with the fact that there is a kind of endowment inequality that seems to be part of species makeup? I mean, I don't even think it's just limited to humans.
Well, I'm not convinced these sort of power laws are are equally true in all fields of activity. So I think there are, when the United States was a frontier country in the 19th century,
right?
And most people were farmers, and presumably some people were better farmers than others. But everyone started with 140 acres of land, and there was this wide open frontier. Even if you had some parts of the society that had more of a power law dynamic, there was a large part that didn't, and that was what I think gave it a certain amount of health. And the challenge is if we've geared our society saying that all that matters is education and PhDs and academic research, and that this has this crazy power law dynamic, then you're just going to have a society in which there are lots of people playing video games in basements or something like that. So that's the way I would frame it. But yeah, I think there definitely are some areas where this is the case, and then we just need we need more growth for the whole society. If you have growth, you'll have a rising tide that lifts all boats, and so it's always it's the stagnation is the problem.
Well, I've joked about this as we are not even communistic in our progressivism, because the old formulation of communism was from each according to his abilities to each according to his needs. And the inability to recognize different levels of ability. I mean, like almost every mathematician or physicist who encountered John von Neumann just said, the guy is smarter than I am. It's not necessarily the deepest, or he did all of the great work, but when you're dealing with somebody who's able to employ skills that you simply don't have. I mean, I know I'm not a concert pianist, and
right. Look, I don't know how you solve the social problem,
right, if
everybody has to be a mathematician or a concert pianist. I want a society in which we have great mathematicians and great concert pianists. That seems that would be a very healthy society.
Right.
It's very unhealthy if every parent thinks their child has to be a mathematician or a concert pianist, and that's the kind of society we unfortunately have.
Well, this is why I try to sell you sometimes on a more progressive view of the world, which is I want deregulated capitalism. I want the people who have the rare skill sets to be able to integrate across many different areas. And to be honest, this is the thing that I wish more people understood about what you bring, which is that you're able to think in 15 different idioms that most people only have one or two of. And so whatever it is that you're doing to integrate these things as an investor into direct research and direct work is really something that, I've watched firsthand for 6 years. The problem that I have is we are going to have to take care of the median individual. And I less think that the median individual is going to be reachable by the market over time as some of these things that are working in silicon in terms of machine learning.
But then you're being more optimistic on progress in tech than is, because I think yes. Look, if we have runaway automation,
right,
and if we're building robots that are smarter than humans and can do everything humans can do, then we probably have to have a serious conversation about a universal basic income or something like that, and you're going to end up with a very, very weird society. I don't see the automation happening at all. And I think the question of automation in my mind, is identical to this question of productivity growth. There is, we've been automating for 250 years since the
Right.
Industrial Revolution, agriculture and manufacturing. And the sort of society we have in the early 21st century is one in which most jobs are non-tradable service sector jobs that are not easily automatable. So it's like a waiter in a restaurant, it's a yoga instructor, it's a nurse, it's a kindergarten teacher. And that's what most jobs in our society are. And because they're they've been so resistant to automation, that this may be one of the reasons why the productivity numbers are slowing down.
Right.
Even if we're still innovating as fast in manufacturing, and even if we're still improving agriculture, they're a smaller and smaller part of the economy. And so even 5% a year productivity growth in manufacturing, that means a lot more in manufacturing 60% of the economy than it does when it's, say, 20% of the economy. And so that's roughly what I think would happen. If you just look at the current dynamic in the U.S. is we have unemployment like 3.6, 3.7%.
Right.
It's super low. It's and still there doesn't seem to be that much wage pressure. That there doesn't seem to be that much growth. The productivity numbers still aren't great. You'd think there'd be enormous incentives to increase productivity.
To me. Yeah.
But I think, well, again, my read on it is just the automation story has been oversold.
Well, I agree that the automation story has been oversold.
Like, it's possible it's going to happen. It's possible it's just around the corner and it's about to happen. But that's what we've been told in a lot of these areas over the last 40, 50 years.
So I have a couple questions about this. One is sort of, if I think about how common retail occupations are, is there something about retail that is resistant to Amazonification, if you will, where people actually want to go shop in a physical place and are willing to pay a premium that we haven't understood would to have human contact? Maybe there's some information exchange. Maybe there's a recreational aspect that's bundled. That's one of my two questions. And the other one surrounds the idea that we've always focused on, like, when is AGI coming and the robots that will do everything? And part of the lesson for me about machine learning is how many things humans were doing that don't require anything like artificial general intelligence. Just some specialized neural net seems to be good enough to do the job. So those would be two questions in my mind as to how. Yes,
but I think all these things, you have to concretize.
Right.
And yes, I think retail is a sector that's under, quite a bit of pressure and is going to stay under quite a bit of pressure. That's maybe the top. That's the top one I would.
It's pretty looks vulnerable to me.
But that's the and that's like Amazon is the most threatening of the big tech companies, and that it's threatening a lot of other companies elsewhere in the industry and disrupting them and making things more efficient, but probably with a lot of sheer forces at work in that process. So I agree that that's a candidate for automation or productivity improvements or things like that. I'm still not convinced that it's in the aggregate shifting things that much. And then we can go through all sorts of individual job descriptions where people used to have secretaries because typing was a skill, and with a word processor you don't quite need this. You can do short emails. You don't quite need a secretary. People still have executive assistants that sort of somehow do slightly different set of responsibilities, but it's not clear we have fewer executive assistants than we used to have secretaries. And so when one actually concretizes it, it's not quite clear how much how disruptive the automation that's happening really is. It's always it's a version of the tech stagnation thing.
Right.
It's always last 40, 50 years, things have been slow. We're always told it's about to accelerate like crazy. That may be true. In some ways, I hope that's true. But if one was simply extrapolating from the last 40 to 50 years, perhaps the default is that we should be more worried about the lack of automation than excess automation.
Well, that's really interesting.
And so, yeah, and again, I think